Welcome back, guys. It's Rich from Rerun Zone. I want to talk about The Time Tunnel, one of my favorite television series from the 1960s. They only produced one season and 30 episodes of this great series, but I still have my favorites. So without further ado, here are my top 5 episodes of The Time Tunnel. Number 5, One Way to the Moon. This show takes us into the space race in this episode when our heroes, Doug Phillips and Tony Newman, find themselves transported from the time tunnel to a rocket ship that's part of a manned mission to Mars. Here, they're treated as stowaways and spies and are threatened with being thrown off the ship. Their excess weight is slowing the spacecraft down, making the mission impossible without an emergency refueling on the moon. The actual cause of the problem, though, is a saboteur aboard the flight who turns out to be an enemy agent. The Russians want to stop the Americans from reaching Mars first. The twist is that very agent, 10 years younger, is invited to the time tunnel complex to observe the future success of the U.S. space program. The episode isn't just a great adventure, but also a Cold War spy thriller. It ends with Tony and Doug stranded on the moon, and as the spaceship blasts off for Mars, our heroes are transported back into the whirling time vortex. Number 4, End of the World. I've always had a fascination with Halley's Comet, and I've traced that fascination all the way back to this particular episode. In the episode End of the World, we're taken back to the year 1910, where Tony and Doug find themselves in a small mining town that's in a panic because Halley's Comet is heading towards Earth, and the townspeople are convinced it's a harbinger of doom. While the town is gripped by fear, there's a real disaster taking place, with over 200 miners trapped following a cave-in. Meanwhile, at the time tunnel complex, the gravitational pull of the comet wreaks havoc, nearly claiming the life of one of the technicians. Should they prioritize their own safety or the safety of Tony and Doug? General Kirk finally decides to continue their rescue efforts while working to try and safeguard the tunnel crew. End of the World is a compelling story that combines the town's hysteria with the moral dilemmas that arise in a life-and-death crisis. Tony and Doug must decide if they should reveal their knowledge of history or let events unfold as they're meant to. Number 3, Chase Through Time. Our heroes now find themselves tumbling into 1547, near the Grand Canyon. While back at the Time Tunnel HQ, a lone scientist is on duty, while the regulars are taking a break. A spy, disguised as a tunnel technician, kills the scientist and plants a bomb in a nearby computer panel. The saboteur then escapes through the time tunnel, which is set to Tony and Doug's location. Security investigates and discovers that the spy is a foreign agent whose task is to destroy the tunnel with a nuclear bomb. Even with the threat of the nuclear bomb, General Kirk, Ann, and Dr. Swain make the decision to stay instead of evacuating. Tony and Doug now have a new mission: to capture the spy and find out where the bomb's been planted. As they close in on the killer, the time tunnel's lock shifts and flings the spy into the far future, with Tony and Doug following him to the year 1 million AD. Here, they find him building another time machine to help the future inhabitants become masters of the human race. They all end up getting sent back through time to the year 1 million BC, where they're all trapped in a giant beehive. This episode combines espionage, science fiction, time travel, action, and the threat of nuclear annihilation in one action-packed hour-long episode. The use of music from The Day the Earth Stood Still and the effects from Forbidden Planet gives a great nostalgic touch to this episode. Number 2, The Day the Sky Fell In. This episode is a portal back to December 6, 1941, the day before the infamous attack on Pearl Harbor. Tony Newman and Doug Phillips find themselves in the middle of military tensions and personal drama. Tony, in particular, is confronted with a personal story as he finds out that his father is stationed on one of the ships in Pearl Harbor. Should Tony save his father's life, potentially altering history? The brilliance of this episode lies in the way it intertwines Tony's personal stakes with the drama of historical events. It offers a delicate moral dilemma. Should Tony intervene in the past and risk possible repercussions on the fabric of time? The Day the Sky Fell In stands out for its emotional depth. The performances are particularly gripping, as we watch our favorite characters fight with the balance of history and personal choices. It's a blend of science fiction and historical narrative and offers a glimpse into the personal impacts of time travel and global events. Honorable mention, The Death Trap. Before I get to my number one pick, I do have one honorable mention. The Death Trap is a fascinating episode in several ways. It sends our heroes, Tony and Doug, to February 1861 in one of the lesser-known chapters of American history called the Baltimore Plot. That was a real-life conspiracy to assassinate Abraham Lincoln before he could be sworn in as president. They tumble into a barn where there's a group of conspirators plotting to kill Lincoln. The Death Trap showcases both the concept of time travel and the emotional and moral complexities of dealing with the past. The title itself shows the dangers that Tony and Doug face as they navigate historical situations with the knowledge that they could somehow change history. Do they have the right to change anything, or a moral responsibility to the future to do nothing? Or is just their presence in the past somehow already a part of the future? The Death Trap explores this pivotal moment in history where the characters must confront life or death decisions that could alter the very fabric of time itself. It's a great example of how the time tunnel merges historical drama with the adventures of time travel and provides a fascinating window into the past. Number 1. Rendezvous with Yesterday. This is the very first episode and is still my personal favorite. It introduces us to Project Tic-Toc and gives us the premise and the visuals that set us up for the rest of the series. Right from the start, when the car drives through the desert and is swallowed up by a ramp that suddenly appears in the ground, I was hooked. Rendezvous with Yesterday sets the tone for the entire series of the time tunnel. It introduces us to the concept of the show, the characters, and the stakes involved in time travel. We meet Dr. Tony Newman and Dr. Doug Phillips for the first time. We're also introduced to Senator Clark, who threatens to shut down the project due to a lack of results. Tony is determined to prove that the tunnel actually works, so he sends himself back in time, where he lands on the deck of the Titanic just days before it hits an iceberg. When Doug realizes what happened, he follows Tony into the past to try to rescue his friend. By placing the characters into a historical event, the show raises the stakes and highlights the dangerous potential of time travel. I mean, if you could change history, would you? Or even, should you? Like all lists, this one is very subjective, and as these are just my top 5 favorite episodes, what are your memories of the time tunnel? Do you have your own top 5 list? If so, leave it in the comments below. And as always, this is Rich from Rerun Zone, signing off for now.